Hello, you're watching Context, a special edition of Context. I'm Orkan Amishov here. Here at A News, we continue to follow the fast-moving developments in and around the Islamic Republic of Iran, providing factual reporting alongside analysis from commentators and sources close to the matter. Early this morning, Israel, in close coordination with the United States, carried out a series of strikes across Iran, including in the capital, Tehran. The operation has prompted Iranian retaliation as expected. Tehran has officially declared that all US assets in the region constitute legitimate targets, significantly widening the scope of the unfolding escalation. Some of the impacts of these retaliatory measures were not confined strictly to military installations. Images circulating from the United Arab Emirates, including areas in proximity to the Palm Jumeirah district in Dubai, suggest that civilian adjacent zones may also have been affected. In fact, they have been affected on the basis of the reports that we receive from that part of the world. The Israel Defense Forces, IDF, have stated that they completed what they described as a broad strike operation against the Islamic Republic of Iran. According to the IDF, one of the targets included an advanced air defense system in the Kermanshah city in western Iran. Israeli officials indicated that the objective was to establish and enhance the Israeli Air Force's freedom of operation in Iranian airspace and to degrade Iran's military capabilities. Meanwhile, this, of course, escalation is happening against the backdrop of the failed discussions as part of the third round in Geneva between the United States and Iran, which were, of course, indirect conversation about Iran's nuclear infrastructure. But diplomatic track is also intensifying through the UN Security Council. An emergency meeting of this very body, top UN body, has been called for later today in New York at the request of Bahrain, one of the countries involved in this entire process by virtue of its location, Colombia, China, Russia and France, the last three being permanent members of UN Security Council. The meeting is expected to convene shortly after midnight here at Baku time. The UN Secretary General has condemned the escalation and called for an immediate cessation of hostilities. Well, there were earlier reports suggesting that residences associated or linked with Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and President Masoud Pezeshkian had been targeted. But subsequent reports seem to indicate that both leaders are alive, and Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has acknowledged the possible loss of senior military figures, with this particular information being confirmed later, though details, of course, remain limited. The situation remains highly volatile and fluid, and today we'll be discussing this unfolding situation, which is of greater significance, not just for this region, not just for this part of the world, but for the entire world. There's a number of guests joining us from different parts of the world, and currently I'm joined by Lieutenant General Rafael Martins from Lisbon, Portugal, and Nuno Vanu Martins, political analyst, who's joining from Brussels, from the EU capital. Welcome to both of you, and thank you very much indeed for allocating time to join Context Special.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
General, my first question is going to be addressed to you. Let's try to understand the military component of what's happening. Do you believe in the basis of that military build-up which the US has cultivated in the region? They have whatever they need in order to achieve their military objectives. And what are those actually military objectives?
Again, thank you for having me. As you mentioned before, the concentration of military power, naval and air especially, but also all the support units or designated force multipliers in the region in the last weeks or months, they have kind of announced what was to be, what it is today, this morning. So the United States, and with I think the help of Israel, they have gathered all the intelligence and they have made their calculations on the firepower and not only the quality but also the quantity of not only firepower, but also all the electronic warfare, intel, infiltration vectors on Iranian soil probably. And they have started this operation, which they have calculated that would be, his objectives would be reached depending on the reaction of Iran. They are aware that Iran is in the possession of a large quantity and diversification of drones and missiles, and not only that, probably other capabilities. So they have started this air campaign based on eventually weeks of air campaign, and Donald Trump assumed that they will probably have casualties based on the capabilities that Iran has been concentrating. So I think their rationale is moving on, and also the expectations that the Iran leadership, by his Ministry of Foreign Affairs message, he said he would target the region. And you know that Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Israel, Kuwait, Qatar, they've all been targeted so far. And I think this is just the beginning. There is more to come. What is really difficult now is to assess the number of sorties that are necessary for the Iranian regime to go into negotiations, either for capitulation or for some sort of negotiation with the United States.
Thank you, General. Very grateful to you. Mr. Martins, what is your take on this unfolding situation? What are the military objectives? I mean, I remember when we were discussing the 12-day war last summer, many analysts were sort of arguing in different ways, but there were two competing considerations. One was that is it the end of the beginning or beginning of the end? Basically, Islamic Republic of Iran survived that 12-day war, and they managed to bounce back. But what about this particular phase? I mean, IDF statement says that IDF has completed broader strike on Iran, and they have achieved their purpose, which was domination of Iranian airspace. What else needs to be attained, and how do you evaluate Iranian resilience in the face of all of these joint attacks?
Well, I think first and foremost that we have to disconsider or to separate what happened in the War of the 12 Days and what is happening now. Because it is clear that this was being prepared, this was being exposed as a preparation. It was not by chance that the movements in warfare by the American Army and Navy was clearly moving into that direction. That's on one hand. On the other hand, it is also clear, according to what was said by President Trump, that there is the will of a regime change. And the question that everybody has been asking in the past, and we can also ask today, is how strong the regime is and how strong the regime can internally manage to maintain power. So you have different options here. One of the options was that with this attack, you could have a revolution, continuing the revolution in Iran. This is one possibility. The other possibility is to have someone inside the regime. Clearly, we could see that in the past with when Israel attacked inside Iran. So you have some people within the regime who will be able and willing to cooperate both with the Americans and the Israelis, and then probably to move on into a different type of regime in the near future. Or the regime will stay and control the situation because of the power of the Revolutionary Guard. So we don't know exactly at this moment. I think it's too early to say what is the take. I think pretty much that the will of the attacks is to create an internal revolution. It's a total type of difference between the past with the American interventions and what is going on with the Trump administration today. Clearly, nobody's going to put. It doesn't look like that. That both the Americans and the Israelis are going to put boots on the ground. So, my take is that I think both the Israelis and the Americans were secure enough that within something could happen to basically get away of the regime.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm just being told that Dr. Mehdi Demirtas from Ankara, political analyst, joined us. Dr. Demirtas, thank you very much indeed joining us. My question to you, is diplomacy over? I mean, what happened? We remember last year the Israeli strikes on Iran and Iranian retaliation, effectively 12-day war, put an end to the nuclear talks back then. And this one is happening, this particular escalation, which probably could be described as a war, I suppose. The term war would be perfectly applicable to the circumstances prevailing there on the ground, has put an end to, is happening against the backdrop of the failed Geneva talks. Although we received initially, first thing in the morning and yesterday, some information from Geneva that negotiations are on the verge of producing something tangible. Even Oman's foreign minister said that the countries need space to be able to attain peace, but escalation today probably means that diplomacy is over as things stand now? What is your evaluation of what's happening?
Thank you, Mr. Amoshev, also for inviting in such a critical time again. Unfortunately, in these last maybe 2 years, we have not exceeded this barrier of this critical times, because every week, not exceptionally, every week we see another important development and hot tension, especially in this region, in neighboring region of Turkey also. But of course, one of the maybe first issue for years, actually also for months now, Iran. Iran is the case of international politics, of American politics, I think, for the decades. But maybe it is much more suitable time for American diplomacy to utilize in the history of American, politics, we always seen that these diplomats, or maybe these milder sections, always can have some voices upon this hawkish side, upon some Republican maybe idealists. But nowadays, I think after Bush, maybe also please do not forget that Mr. George Bush and his traditions. After him, maybe just this Trumpist era showed us this hawkish side at the end of the day is really this victorious side in American politics. Maybe with the help of Israel also. As you said, diplomacy is unfortunately over for maybe just last decades. Unfortunately, after Palestine, we must not forget, it is not the case only of Iran, it is the case of the region, Mr. Avashov. And we can say that Israel maybe did this just in Qatar talks. Please also remind the audience that Israel always, I think, pushes maybe Mr. Trump and this American government, hawkish government, that something must be done so urgently. I don't know why so urgently, because Iran is a regime. We all know that it's a strong regime. Of course, we know the insufficiencies. We know these gaps of these regimes, of such kind of regimes. Also, American regime, in every kind of regime, we have some gaps. But we can say that diplomacy is over for Israel, for American politics. But in the sense of their diplomacy, I think it started when these attacks stopped. So the regime of America, the regime of Israel showed us that everything is maybe shaped according to their needs and according to their national interests. Of course, it's unacceptable. Since the beginning of this morning, I think we heard many news from the world, from United Nations, from Turkey, Russia, China, and many other countries, and they already showed that this is not the way of international politics. But I think these two actors think differently, and I think for now, yes, diplomacy is not the shape or the form that we know maybe just in these last 200 and 300 years, but this diplomacy and other kinds, I want to call it always, maybe some scholars do not accept that postmodern kind of American diplomacy, and such a kind of diplomacy, unfortunately, doesn't serve humanity and doesn't serve indeed the ideal situation of United Nations or international stability.
Thank you, Dr. Demirtas. Lieutenant General, Mr. Martins, my next question is to you. We already talked about an American perception of Iranian danger, and that danger probably has got a couple of layers to it, a couple of components. One is Iran's nuclear capabilities. Last year, the US president said that after 12-day war, after the United States targeted those nuclear sites in Iran, that Iran's nuclear capabilities had been raised to the ground. But still, we talk about Iran's nuclear capabilities. And there's a second component, missile ballistic infrastructure of Iran, Iran's naval prowess and so forth. What should happen regarding Iran's capabilities, military capabilities? To what extent they should be curbed for Americans to be convinced that Iran is no longer a source of danger for Washington?
Thank you again.
Lieutenant General, this question is addressed to you.
Now, thank you. The attacks on summer for the nuclear sites, I think the assessment of the degree of destruction, although Trump said that they were destroyed, we are not sure. Actually, it was allegedly by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Iran. They did not allow monitoring the International Atomic Agency to go there and check it because it was too dangerous or there was some radiation. But in fact, they could not access the degree of destruction. They could not access the enriched uranium quantity, which is between 400 and 600 kilograms. Also, that is what was mentioned in the open information. And so that was a doubt. I think the Israelis and the United States, they were not sure if the nuclear capabilities and the nuclear program have been obliterated. And I think this airstrikes today, this operation today, it's a proof that Iran continued or had enough potential to accelerate to a nuclear program. Words are slightly different from assessments. We don't know, we know the words, we don't know if the assessments of the United States are real or not. But Iran was committed not to develop nuclear weapons, not to go into this nuclear program, but use the enriched uranium for peaceful purposes, either medicine or others. So what the United States and Israel had to do was to believe the words of Iran. They didn't believe it. And also the words of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Iran said that they would not curb the missile program. It was in Iran's security interest to have some kind of deterrence program. And the missiles, which have medium range and eventually long range, they would go to ballistic. That would be some kind of, it's like frightening for the region and would create imbalance. And this was also a request from not only the region, but especially from Israel and the interests of the United States. So, and then there was this naval component. So there was this very suspicious feeling from Israel and pushing the United States that the military buildup in Iran, being not only nuclear, but also especially the missile program, they had to be destroyed. And that is what they have started to do now, although the negotiations would keep on going. And I believe that eventually the Iranian government would give up something more, but never what was like maximized by the United States. I think the maximalist demands of the United States and Israel were not acceptable for Iran, and Iran is now ready for this unfortunate confrontation.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Nuno Martins, but a lot is happening. We are in the process of digesting different pieces of information coming our way. We know that several key US assets have been targeted in the Middle East. We know that some non-military installations have been targeted by Iranian forces as well. Bearing in mind that you're joining us from from Brussels, from the capital of the bureaucratic capital of the European Union, I want to ask about the European position. UK and which is not a member of the European Union, and EU member countries have said that they are not part of the operation. They are very concerned. They condemned Iran's retaliatory measures, but they seem to be kind of distancing themselves from what's happening there. What is the key European sensibility as long as the position of the Brussels and major European countries are concerned?
Well, you had already a joint statement by President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, and Mrs. Callas, which basically says everybody to refrain, not to have a counter response by the Iranians, and to try to continue the negotiations. The question is exactly that, which means that once again, the major European countries or the European Union as a whole is completely outside of whatever is going on in terms of conflict between, let's say, superpowers or between the major fields that we are facing now in the world. It's going with Ukraine, it's now going with Iran. And I do believe that there is a reason for that. And the reason for that is the lack of decision making on one hand, the lack of serious awareness about what is the threats that we are facing here. I have to remember that we have, even though it's not explicitly so, a type of entente from Greece up to, let's say, to the Emirates, or then even to India, on terms of energy. And in these terms, the Iranians are a threat, and I don't like that. So we have to say that we have to see the big picture. And unfortunately, the big picture for Europe was always to push for, as we say, international law on one hand, United Nations resolutions on the other hand. And we all know that this has been a certain type of conflict with the current Trump administration. Therefore, the European position basically do not apply as a whole to when Israel or when the US are trying to create a solution for something that they call a threat. And in that sense, the Iranian regime is a threat to the American interests and is a threat to Israel, as they claim so as well. And I do believe that beyond this, there should be an agreement by the other states in the Middle East, such as Saudi Arabia and even Qatar. They probably had more intel about the attack and about what was going to happen than the Europeans, which is very unfortunate. But this is the path that it was chosen by the Europeans. It was built by the Europeans. And I do believe that the European response will be as delayed and as weak as it is right now. And it will continue to be like that in the coming week.
Dr. Demirtas, Turkey, official Ankara, cannot be, by any standard, be deemed supportive of military attack on Iran, and Turkey has consistently warned against this sort of attack. Turkey is against what could be academically described as regime change in Iran as well, because fundamentally, as we understand, Turkey is worried about the potential fallout. I mean, you may want change in certain area, but if you don't know what will happen afterwards, probably you should be less expansive in your ambitions. What is a major concern for Turkey? And I also would like you to reflect on one particular point. Some Israeli politicians are saying that, well, our key enemy now is Islamic Republic of Iran, and once we're done with Iran, our real enemy will be Turkey. Has it been heard in Turkey what Turkish political analysts and establishment have so far made of this particular view, which is floating in the air in Israel?
Yes, Mr. Ramasho, maybe start with the second part of your question, which is much more important propaganda of Israel, I think, since again this outbreak of this Palestinian atrocities of what they are done in Palestine, actually what is done as genocide, as the United Nations independent expert reports always indicated in these last 2 years there. They're also saying against to our politicians, against to our, of course, some rightist, far rightist. We have also some public opinions, of course, which are inclined to, of course, rightist ideals, nationalist ideals. It is so normal in such country of very deep history like Turkey. Also, we have our brother Azerbaijan. We must understand, I think both Turkey and Azerbaijan must understand Iran. Because of this, I think our foreign ministry maybe showed this understanding, first of all, in every maybe statement for the issues about Iran. Also today's statement, maybe you will also look from the official webpage of Foreign Ministry, that is also a very stable statement and very inclined to protect this rule, I mean, rule of law, the rule of international stability, but also the unacceptability of what United States and Israel done now in Iran. But this doesn't change that, as you said, is Israel's maybe unbounded, maybe unrestricted now behavior, which is really pushed, or which was really motivated, unfortunately, by our important ally, I mean, United States. Because United States administration, I know, yes, Mr. Trump and his Republican important cadre, they have a vision, they have an ideal also in their now politics. Of course, they have important failures or problems in their countries also. Please do not forget this important linkage between domestic and foreign policy also, because after so many clashes in domestic politics, we suddenly saw always such many important outbreak of wars. Think about this very famous tweet of Mr. Trump in 2011. I think it is very circulated today. I mean, he's tweeted about Mr. Obama that he will do something, I mean, in Iran, because his popularity is decreasing, he said in his tweet, just in 2011 tweet. And now it's used against Mr. Trump now, because what is done now in American politics is Mr. Trump's business, but also the business of Iran, I mean, the domestic politics of Iran. It is taught that it is so easily shaped by American or Israeli authorities, they think, in their minds. I mean, this liberal international order, quote unquote. But in Turkish side, in Turkish diplomacy, we have always some question marks, Mr. Amashov, because as I said, whatever these regimes, of course, insufficiencies, these people is also our people. I mean, shared history, shared culture. We are not United States. Because please remember Mr. Zelensky's very frightening words just in this Oval Office. Maybe you remember. He said that there is a big ocean between United States and this crisis atmosphere, I mean, in the part of the other side of the world. And Mr. Trump and Mr. Pence, I mean, they just turned, I'm sorry to tell that, quote unquote, mad. And they really make some very undiplomatic move also to Mr. Zelensky. But I will again repeat this. There is really a big ocean between the United States and this part of world, I will call maybe Eurasia or Middle East. And maybe there can be really some blind sides from this, really from also even diplomats. I know some of diplomats also from the American sections, and they can really have some very different attitude, compared to traditional behavior like in Azerbaijan, Iran, and Turkey. So we must have this lens. We must have this, neutral status as Turkey, and of course against this culturalist war. I will again call this again Judeo-Christian culturalist war, what US and Israel done nowadays. Because if they say yes, this is the Islamic regime of Iran, I think we must also look at this, sayings of, unfortunately, Mr. Trump's and Mr. Netanyahu's sayings. It is really a good Judeo-Christian idealist terms always used with this war. And we cannot support, as the neutral actors, as the neutral supporters of international politics, such culturalist war cannot be supported.
And this is despite the fact, Dr. Demirtas, this is despite terribly sorry for interfering there. And this is despite the fact that Turkey and Iran are at loggerheads in relation to a number of regional matters, specifically regarding this attack and the consequences for the government in Tehran. Turkey's position differs from the position maintained by United States and definitely naturally from Israel. Lieutenant General, just to understand the true scope of the potential fallout of what is happening. So, as was the case last time during the 12-day war, Iran has retaliated by means of targeting US military bases around the Middle East. We heard the news that even the Kuwait International Airport has been attacked or under attack currently. And what is very interesting about this entire confrontation, although the aim is to target military installations and military bases, but also in Dubai, as far as Dubai is concerned, residential district of Dubai has been attacked as well. Where could it lead to in terms of the ramifications, in particular if civilians are being targeted by Iranian attacks? What will be the maximum scope of US retaliation in response to Iranian attacks targeting its military bases?
We are facing something much bigger than last summer for the nuclear installations. Now the Iranians, like they said, they are taking this attacks to the other side of the Gulf, to the region, to Saudi Arabia, to Qatar, to the United Arab Emirates, and eventually even further. So now there is a certain uncertainty. That's why if the United States and Israel, if they want to minimize damage and control the dimension and the nature of conflict, they have to act very effectively. Because if this is dragged in time, there will be serious consequences for the whole region. Now, this is psychologically, economically, and hatred and destruction will be much bigger and will have a larger influence in the region. So I think that's a risk. Of course, it was calculated, but they need to have some mitigation measures, some kind of dialogue. The dialogue needs to get into the equation to avoid dragging this war for more than weeks. And I think this is going to be a conflict for more than weeks, what we are expecting now. And this will cause a lot of danger for civilian people. So we are seeing targeted cities, airports, streets like we are watching now on TV. And this really makes a big impact on people, not only in the region, but beyond this region.
Mr. Martins, Nuno Martins, we earlier heard from President Donald Trump saying, urging basically all Iranians to take over the government, and he also said that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Iranian people. I think the language is very clear there. It's very obvious. And we also heard the news that some of the, not just the commanders of IRGC being targeted, but also the Supreme Leader himself and President Pezeshkian as well. Could this be part of the broader strategy of US and Israel to target and exterminate some of the most consequential figures of the system and negatively impact the national morale, creating fertile ground for further chaos in the country? Do you think how important is to target this leadership? In particular, I think the person of Supreme Leader is a kind of it's a different scale, of course, and this, in many analysts argued that if his person is targeted, the implications will be too hideous to contemplate, because Iran will go all-scale war without any limitations. What do you make of this entire debate surrounding targeting those consequential figures?
Well, first and foremost, if we follow a certain narrative, we basically impeaches any attack against another country on the basis that the people do not support an attack, but they support the regime. This is the best example where the people is opposing the regime for long. And that opposition got strength in the past months, in the past few months. So it is, in my view, completely normal that in the strategy, especially used by Israel to eliminate, which was followed also by the US in Venezuela, for instance, to eliminate the top leadership of the regime, that gives not chaos in my view, but it will give strength to the opposition to come to the street and to try to take over. It's not going to be easy because of the influence and the strengths of the Revolutionary Guard on one hand, and second, there were always doubts about, for instance, the case of Prince Pahlavi in taking power in Iran. But I do believe that the support of Prince Pahlavi in Iran is bigger than usually people think it is. And that's because of certain footage that came out and certain opinions that came out saying that people were supporting Prince Pahlavi to be the next leader of Persia or of Iran, of the next regime, whatever. The question is, what we are seeing here, in my view, is a type of counter-revolution. It's not a revolution, in the sense that counter-revolution to what happened in 1979. And what happened in 1979 was basically the support of the West, namely of France and the Carter administration, to put a new regime in place for different reasons. And this is basically a backstep to that. And it's a backstep because in the past 47 years, we only had problems with the regime. The regime not only created and financed terror around the world, it created a certain narrative against the West, it opprimated its own citizens, and therefore, those who lead the regime, I do believe, and it was said before by the honorable Turkish commentator, about the fact that the regime is a religious Sunni Shiite regime. I don't believe, to be honest, that the difference between Sunnis and Shiites nowadays in the Middle East is as strong to be used as an argument not to make two different orientations in the Islam religion as it used to be in the past, let's say, I would say 20, 30 years ago. Everybody was writing that Sunnis and Shiites are different and we have to be careful with that distinction and we don't want to put people in confrontation. I do believe that today what the people of Iran wants is freedom. They understood that this regime is oppressing them, it's oppressing the world, and there is strength, and I do believe also that both the Americans and the Israelis, they attacked, these territorial attacks were made on the basis that the Iranian people could make something to overturn the regime. It is not clear at this moment if the top leaders of the regime are alive. It's apparently they are alive, according to what the foreign minister of Iran said, that at least he thinks they are alive. What is important to understand is how strong will be the Revolutionary Guard, as I said before. And this can be the key to change the future and to see how long this war will continue and will endure it, basically.
Dr. Demirtas, if you would like to reflect on what Mr. Martins said, please, by all means. But I've got a specific question to you. The question revolves around the situation here in the South Caucasus. All the countries here, Azerbaijan, Armenia in particular, are very careful. They're sharing a long border. And Azerbaijan shares a massive border with Iran, of course, and Iran does share a border as well. Very tiny, 42-kilometer section, commensurate with the Zangezur corridor. I mean, a couple of things to bear in mind when the sensibilities pervading here are concerned. First of all, massive concern because it's an escalation. It's very hard to predict its fallout, therefore concern. An escalation of this type cannot be welcomed by Azerbaijan, number one. Number two, on the basis of official statements coming from the relevant institutions of this nation, it has been made very clear beyond any doubt that the territory of this country will not be used against Iran or against any third-party country. And simultaneously, this is no longer official position, but it's a view dominating within the analytical circles that, well, we may be very critical of Islamic Republic of Iran for many reasons, but we don't know what will happen afterwards and whether any political system replacing it will be any better because of the memory associated with their pre-1979 Iran and the way Pahlavi dynasty treated Azerbaijani population of Iran. What do you make of all of these factors? And how careful do you think countries in this region, in particular Azerbaijan, should be in order to ensure that they are not dragged in this conflict? Because one of our guests earlier joining us from London said that Tehran himself may be interested in dragging others in order to win the battle, which is not at all in the interest of the countries of this region.
Mr. Ramashov, first of all, thank you also for your contribution, because I also seen all your valuable interviews and also your area expertise, also with the important personalities from Iran. In these last weeks, you have also important maybe connections with them. I mean, about this corridors, about these projects, which is flourishing actually in, as you said, in South Caucasia between Azerbaijan and Armenia, first of all, but also in these four important actors, I mean, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia. I mean, we have a future. We all see that after some, of course, again, conflictual years, after this Soviet unfortunate years, we already seen that some things can be done. But Iran's also, as a pragmatic, we can say, as a pragmatic player, can adapt itself to this changing circumstances. At least they showed with some personalities, I mean, with ministers, with some bureaucrats, of course, with some important diplomats like Mr. Arakchi, also with some milder or moderate faces like Mr. Pezeshkian. I mean, current President Mr. Pezeshkian must be given credit. Still, I think such personalities, balances the actors also inside this Iranian regime. I also agree with the other commentators, of course, beliefs, but I also think that Iran can have a very different system. I think regarding civil society, regarding the balances inside this, of course, Shiites, Sunnis, and other important maybe ethnic and religious groups, Iran is like a treasure. We can say that in American or Israeli perspective, a very negative treasure. But we can call from the historian or diplomatic perspective, we must be deepen into this treasure. We must really have another surveys and explorations about it. Not just Mr. Pahlavi always says in his social media and with some, I don't know, smelling like propaganda thing explanations nowadays, because in the digital era, such explanations nowadays cannot have so much audience, Mr. Amashov. Yes, in 70s, 80s, even 90s and the beginning of 2000s, we can see such tactics. I mean, to put someone to have a revolution with the hands of some quote-unquote liberal democratic understanding, it could have been so easy, but now I think in such an era where public opinion and domestic politics even the person on the streets, very ordinary personalities and young personalities especially, they can have a real voice and real opinion about that. So as you said, yes, South Caucasus and Iranian relation, we must follow, because after that, after such a change, I want to not spell this change or regime changes, because it cannot bring any hopes, as you also declared. You know, this Afghanistan, look at this table now between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Just 2 days ago, it started another conflict, which is so interesting. There's a line still starting with maybe Turkey and goes directly to the inner of Asia. And we can say that nobody can know what will be the future after such deep, especially changes. For the United States, just linked with my second answer maybe, United States ideology or foreign policy making thinks always this from maybe some rationalist or realist perspective. But I want to repeat again, even the time of choosing such a war today, it's not a psychological game for America. It is Ramadan. Yes, I want to be not a culturalist or religious personality, but still I want to declare that it is really for Shiites, for Sunnis, even for very human rights advocates, it is the date of something. And to win a war, I think you must also to have some psychological background and psychological ground you must have. And even choosing such a date, even choosing such a very provocative understanding, like Israeli politicians always do, as you said, also against Turkey, and say that for South Caucasia, and especially for Azerbaijan, we must be, again, careful for the shared history, Mr. Amasho, for the shared personalities. We must have a tomorrow planning, and this tomorrow planning cannot be done only with the United States. Turkey had once done such a failure, I want to call this failure, because in 60s, 80s, we have many kinds of failures and opinions, Mr. Amasho. I just finished. But I think also we just sense that this understanding of multipolarity now is rising. And I think both Azerbaijan, Turkey, and other actors will understand it after such, especially, deep changes.
Lieutenant General, to understand the military component of the unfolding situation better, I earlier talked about European position. I put a question to Mr. Nuno Martins. The latest report suggests that British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said that UK planes in the sky in Middle East as part of defensive operation. I don't know to what extent US needs European allies there physically present, but do you believe UK presence could help things in terms of limiting the damage, in terms of proper intelligence sharing, and also influencing the process by means of limiting possible consequences?
Well, Starmer has put a little bit of cold water in this fire, but still, I think the process has started, and we never know how long it takes and how it will end. But if really the Iranian population, in the majority, if they want a regime change, even though it's not really the same as the European democracies or the Western democracies, I think there is a price to pay. We have to be realistic. For this transition, you may even run the risk of some kind of civilian war, which is definitely something that nobody wishes. So the challenge here, and I think Starmer and the UK has not only historically, but also in terms of military and intelligence and diplomacy, they can play an important role. Not that they have military capabilities to put into this equation, but for the transition from this conflict of weapons and destruction into a negotiation, I think the UK can have a positive role. And Starmer has condemned Iran, but the UK is ready to be calibrating force, a calibrating element on the conflict right now.
Mr. Nuno Martins, We discussed the internal situation in Iran. One of the challenges in terms of understanding what's happening and analyzing it properly probably stems from the fact that we don't talk to people on the ground in Iran as extensively as we should due to obvious reasons. There's an internet blackout. Some of the people that we try to get in touch with refuse to talk due to security reasons. We don't really know what is the actual mood in the country. I mean, reports that we received throughout the day today, they are sort of a mix of wide range of sentiments. Panic, I mean, certain degree of panic, sense of even relief. Some of the reports indicate that some people are got this sense of relief. There's a mixture of feeling, and we're not entirely sure whether people actually want massive change, government change of any sort. But the UN Security Council meeting will take place in a couple of hours. The permanent members, of course, are there. It was requested by Bahrain, Colombia, and also 3 UN Security Council permanent members of the UN Security Council, including France, China, and Russia. What do you think the position will be there? And do you think that meeting will have any bearing on the fate of Iran and on the fate of the conflict?
Well, set questions in one which are quite interesting and quite pertinent.
Sorry, it's so many questions in one go. Sorry about that.
The first question is very difficult to answer because, of course, that the only way to not get information right now in Iran within the population is what we have seen in the past, the same way we got information about the conflict and the people protesting in Iran, since, if I'm not mistaken, since December. How you do that? You do that through social media, and how you do that without what happened in the past with Starlink being open to certain people. If we are considering, but there is another way of knowing it, and I'll let you know right away. But if we are going to consider the narrative of the regime, I have to say that the narrative of the regime is very interesting because they will say exactly that the population do not want regime change on one hand, and the regime has been very wise since the 1990s. After they took, if I'm not mistaken, they killed one of the former ministers of the Shah. They decided to infiltrate many of the opposition movements, including the Pahlavi movement. And I can tell you this because I have been working with certain movements, and it was clear how they operate, and some people are clearly infiltrated by the regime. What happened recently that I realized, especially in the media in Europe, was that every time that that were inviting people that had a certain age and were coming to the television saying that they were not in favor of any attack, they were not in favor of supporting the population because it would be impossible to have regime change, that there was unity in the country, etc., etc. But when you invite people, young people who live abroad, who say something, it's unbelievable how do they support an attack. And that is, in my view, the reason why I do believe that the population really wants regime change. And then let me tell you another thing. If everybody's concerned about the history of Iran and the fact that Iranian people are very cohesive, why they didn't do the same thing in 1979? Why did they support the regime change in 1979? It's very funny how you have two different narratives for similar moment. But the question is exactly this. In this sense, in my view, the population is going to, as much as they can, to be against the regime. Can I ask the second question, please, that you asked me?
Yeah, please, by all means. By all means.
No, what was the question?
I think the question was about the UN Security Council meeting, which the permanent members, I mean, China, France, and Russia, are convening this meeting of the Security Council. And what do you expect from that meeting? Do you think it will have any considerable consequential bearing upon the developments taking place in and around the Islamic Republic of Iran?
Absolutely not. You will have Russia and China supporting the regime, and you'll have the Americans supporting what they did.
Two countries, China and Russia, have any resources to block US actions Could they somehow change the circumstances on the ground by means of helping Iran? Is there any channel of communication that could benefit Iran? That's what I was trying to clarify as well.
Oh, that's a very good question. I don't know if I am the right person to answer that. I do believe that the Russians, for sure, they don't have the capability to support the Iranians in this moment. The Chinese, it's a question mark. And the question mark is how they can support. They depend somehow. They have been helped regarding the oil from Iran, being helped and helping Iran in selling oil. The question is this: I do believe that the fact that President Trump arranged a meeting and confirmed the meeting in China, if I'm not mistaken, at the end of March, also shows that he knew that this was going to happen before, and he wanted to put some pressure on the Chinese. Right. So the question, to answer your question, I don't know exactly how to do it. I do believe that the Chinese are very worried. I do believe that the Chinese would like to help somehow the Iranians, but how they are going to do that, it's a question mark.
Very briefly, if I may hear from you, Dr. Demirtas, as well, regarding China. Mr. Nuno Martins said that China is a massive question mark. What is China capable of doing in the context of Iran's situation? Very briefly, if I may, because we have to finalize very soon. Literally, we've got for 1 minute.
Thank you. I only add maybe this philosophical framework, because China is not one-day giant, I think. Because I can maybe call United States is one-week giant. He appeared everywhere. Since Vietnam, we have seen such a giant militarily, but I think China's projects are much more exceeding these barriers, and with such one belt, one road. I mean, such projects and everything's just. Also transpassing through Iran, we can say that China in the coming decades will have a much more increasing voice. But about Russia, I think already Mr. Peskov, an important personality, said that such a Pandora's box cannot be opened, but already I think it is somehow opened. I really am curious also what will Russia's next step. But about China, the steps will be much more economically, and I think in the intelligence or digital sectors, we will see next moves of China very soon. I think so.
I would like to thank all our guests, Lieutenant General Rafael Martins, who helped us understand the military component of what's happening, which is an essential component. Mr. Nuno Martins, who joined us from Brussels, from the bureaucratic capital of the European Union, helped us navigate the complexities involving geopolitics, and in particular in reference to the EU position of European countries. And Dr. Mehmet Demirtas, former Turkish diplomat, academic, with whom we largely focused on the regional sensibilities revolving around Turkish position, the sensibilities dominating this region, South Caucasus. I'm very grateful to all of you, and thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for having me.
Well, unfolding developments in and around Iran are of great significance, of course, not just for Iran itself, not just for its immediate neighbors, but for the entire world. Of course, we will continue to follow the fast-moving developments taking place in the context of Israeli-US attack on Iran, which has prompted retaliatory measures from Tehran, providing factual reporting and also, of course, analysis from commentators and sources close to the matter. You've been watching Context Special, and see you very soon.